Cool. All right. I say this at the beginning of every webinar. Everyone kind of knows the drill, but we are going to go over the sustainability standards. We're going to go over standard 2 and 4 in this webinar for the tree farm program. And I will ask everyone to keep their questions until the end, and we'll have a Q&A session. Um, but before we get started, I wanted to go through and do some quick introductions. My name is Casey Willis. I am the Maine Tree Farm Program Coordinator. I am the one you're likely talking to if you're interested in the Maine Tree Farm Program and learning more about what we are, what we do, and how we serve landowners in Maine. I'm going to pass it off to a couple of our other presenters. So, Jared, would you give your a quick intro?
Hi, I'm Jared Gregory. I'm a district forester with Maine Forest Policy and Management Division, and I am likely who you talk to if you want to know more about your woods and you're in my district.
Thank you. Scott Maddox, would you give your introduction?
Certainly. My name is Scott Maddox. I'm a district forest ranger with the Maine Forest Service in the Damascotta District, and it's an area covering 98 towns in the mid-coast and lower foothills.
Thank you. Andy Schultz, would you give your quick intro?
Sure. Hi, my name is Andy Shultz. I am a part-time consulting forester, also an inspecting forester for Tree Farm and the Kennebec County Chair. So you might talk to me if you have a tree farm or want to be a tree farmer in Kennebec County.
Perfect. Thank you all. All right, without further ado, let's get into what the sustainability standards are and what they mean and how you follow them. So, really quickly, an overview. To be a part of the Maine Tree Farm program, we have 8 sustainability standards that we require our members to follow in order to be a part of our program. And what these standards are just they're internationally recognized metrics that say what management you're doing on your woodlot is called sustainable and is reputable and based on the best available science. So we, as an organization, check to make sure that our landowners are upholding this through an inspection process where an inspecting forester like Andy will go and do a walk and talk in your woodlands and make sure that you are following what these standards are. And so, to make sure that our landowners know what they're agreeing to, we're hosting this webinar series to go into our 8 tree farm sustainability standards. As I stated at the beginning, this webinar will go over standard 2 and 4. And if you're wondering why 2 and 4, we tried to group them based on content so that we could have industry professionals like Jared and like Scott give specific advice relating to these standards. So this webinar is going to be covering the rules and regulations of tree farm and of forestry at large. So standard 2 is, like I said, compliance with laws. And this standard says forest management activities must comply with all relevant federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and ordinances. And you can read the fine print here, but I'm actually going to pass it off to District Forester Jared to go a little bit deeper into what that means and what those rules are. And so, Jared, just let me know when you want me to click the next slide, and we'll keep cruising.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, you can go ahead and forward past this one. So, as we mentioned before, I am a district forester with Maine Forest Policy and Management. So, what does that actually mean? There's 12 of us throughout the state. Here's our district map. I'm the little pink district near the coast. I cover Lincoln County and part of Kennebec County. Uh, Apologize if you all just heard me get an email. So, basically district foresters are kind of the first line of defense with the rules and regulations that we oversee. If there is a problem on one of the harvests, or if somebody reports a problem, we go check it out, and we collect some evidence to decide whether or not one of the rules and regulations has been not followed, and try to do some sort of remediation with the harvester or the forester. In most cases, it's an accidental thing, and it just takes a little bit of remediation effort, some education, and by the end of it, we kind of consider it like a time served sort of thing. The amount of money and effort that they put into fixing their little problem and the education that we gave them, we say, okay, it's unlikely to happen again, we'll move on. If they fight us on it, or if it's a major problem, it might get escalated to a regional enforcement coordinator. There might be like something like a settlement agreement, some actual monetary penalties, things like that. And in rare circumstances, if it's just really egregious or they're really combative about it, we might put a case together for the Attorney General's office to prosecute. That happens only very extremely rarely. In the vast majority of cases, it's handled on the district forester level. You can go ahead. So we talked about kind of the framework for how we deal with violations of the rules, but I want to just do a quick look at what the rules are. This is normally a 4+ hour class, and I'm going to be trying to do it in about 5 minutes. So please keep your seatbelts fastened and your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. We're going to be moving fast. So we have Chapter 26, Forest Operation Notifications, Chapter 20, Forest Practices Act, Chapter 21, Statewide Standards for Timber Harvesting Related Activities in Shoreland Areas. Specifically, this applies to organized towns. And then Chapter 27 is basically the same thing, but for unorganized towns. The rules are a little bit different, but overall, they're broadly similar. So we'll be grouping them today for time. Next slide, please. Our favorite way to prevent violations of any rules and regulations is through education. As such, we make ourselves available as readily as possible to answer any questions. We come out to harvest sites to educate loggers and help them figure out, hey, how do these rules that we're telling you about, how do they apply to your specific situation? And we also offer these publications. The one on the right, you see the red book, that's the Forestry Rules of Maine. That's what we'll be covering right now. Here in a little while, we'll talk about bullet point number 2, best management practices. So next slide, please. So jumping right in, Chapter 26, Forest Operation Notifications. This comes from the 1989 Forest Practices Act. And the two main things it does is requires landowners to notify Maine Forest Service when they're having a harvest. And it also requires them to fill out a report after the harvest, letting us know what products and how much of what products were taken off the landscape. The two major things that this does for us is, one, as Maine Forest Service, we're mandated by the state of Maine to be the kind of overall stewards for Maine's forests. So this gives us data to operate based on, gives us a broad look at what's going on in the state so that we can make informed decisions. And also this creates a chain of custody, like a paperwork trail for all the wood products that are coming off the landscape, so that it helps us dramatically cut down on the instances of timber theft and timber trespass, just because the wood is accounted for. Next slide, please. So moving right on forward to Chapter 20, Forest Practices Act, as related to forest regeneration and clear cutting standards. I'm sure everybody in this room has heard the word clear cut. This is the chapter that deals with the definition of a clear cut, as well as the regulations on the size and dispersion of them and separation of them. Everything you need to know about how to make a clear cut and not get in trouble, that's what's in here. And just to clarify, clear cuts do have a bad name. There are certain circumstances where they are a suitable thing to do. Not as often in Maine, but just because it's a clear cut doesn't inherently mean it's bad. And the rules, if you follow the rules in this chapter, it really is helpful for making clear cuts not bad. Next slide, please. So for example, what is the definition of a clear cut, right? Obviously, if there are no trees left, that's a clear cut, but where's the tipping point, right? At some point, it stops being a thinning and starts being a clear cut. So we define that in Chapter 20. We talk about how many of what species and what size of trees and what quality need to be left behind, or lacking mature trees, how many younger trees need to be left behind. So you can see here, there are some trees left. There are some smaller regeneration or baby trees there too. But is it a clear cut? Spoiler alert, yes, it is. Absolutely. This is not what you want it to look like unless you are intentionally doing a clear cut. Next slide, please. So this is just a really good picture example of what the law leads to when you're following it properly. The idea here really is just instead of this all being one massive clear cut like it very well could have been if we didn't have these laws, instead we have it cut up and separated by these separation zones as they're labeled. And the idea here is just breaking it up into bite-sized chunks that Mother Nature can over time fill back in without too much craziness, right? Like it's something that's not going to take an unduly long time to recover from whatever happened there. Next slide, please. So jumping right on to chapter 21 and 27. So this is timber harvesting and related activities in shoreland areas. So shoreland areas meaning streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, ocean, wetlands. If it's water, pretty much there's a rule about it. Next slide, please. But just like with clear cuts, we also need definitions for, what do we actually consider to be a stream? We actually do have that defined. So it has to have defined banks, lack terrestrial vegetation, or have an exposed parent material bed, and it has to be hydrologically connected. That third point is very important. Next slide, please. Because right here we have on the left, that is a stream. On the right, that is not a stream. And the major difference here is that third point, hydrologically connected. And what that means is it flows to something that's important, right? So if you get sediment or a pollutant or something into the stream on the left, that's going to flow probably into a larger stream, which might flow into a river, which might flow into a pond or the ocean or something like that. There's a domino effect. On the right, if you get sedimentation or something in there, it's still not great that you've messed up that individual little water body, but it's not going anywhere. All you've done is just that spot. So it's not nearly as ecologically impactful, and therefore it doesn't have the same kind of protections about it as the thing on the left has. So a big part of this is just defining like when and in what circumstances it has protection, and if so, what protections it has. Next slide, please. And of course, as it might make sense, the larger your stream, the more protection it has. This is just the illustration that we have for, where the higher protections kick in. It's based on the amount of land that drains into that point in the stream. And the larger it is, the more protection it has. That protection is often in the form of a vegetative buffer, meaning you have to leave trees around the water body to provide shade and filter out sediment and things in water that might be flowing toward the water body. Next slide, please. And here's a practical example of these buffers. The blue line down at the bottom, that is the water's edge for a pond here with an associated wetland. So that is where the forest, the water stops and the forest starts, right? That first red line, that's the 75-foot buffer, and that second red line is the 250-foot buffer. The protections in the 75-foot buffer are higher than the protections further out in the 250. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, they fail miserably on both accounts. This is one that would definitely have a lot of legal problems. But just to give you an idea of kind of what that normally can look like. Next slide, please. And that's it for me.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank
There
you.
you go.
A lot of information really quickly, but I think you hit the main points. Something that may not be covered is that there are rules that the district foresters oversee, and then there are rules that the forest rangers oversee. And so now we're going to pass it off to Scott to talk about what his job entails and all the rules that he is helpful in getting more information about. So, Scott, off to you.
Okay, thank you, Casey, very much. So I wanted to pick a few laws and rules that would probably be of interest to you. And a ranger's daily job, you can see the timber harvest inspections in there. Those are normal. Rangers are out and about looking for wildfire issues, and they're looking for open burning issues as well. But when we see a timber harvest, we like to stop and check and make sure everything's okay. So that's part of normal operation. So don't be alarmed if you see a ranger pulled up to your woodlot and talking to your harvester and stuff like that. We're looking for all sorts of things, like some of the laws that Jared referred to, the Forest Operations Notification Law. It requires that the number be posted at the principal yard. That's one of the things that we're looking for. And we're looking for water quality issues, any kind of water quality we like to check, stream crossings, cutting near ponds, like Jared mentioned. The rangers are out looking for that. And we communicate a lot with the district foresters back and forth. Jared knows that, we talk quite a bit together. And if we see something that applies to him, we let him know. And if he sees something that applies to us, he lets us know. So those are normal operations. So that hits the notification. Jared covered that very well. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, something that might be interesting to you, is that the harvesting timber near property line law. State law requires that anywhere within 200 feet of an active timber harvest, that the property lines be marked by a temporary and visible means, and that means flagging. So if you've hired a licensed forester to oversee your harvest, which we recommend, that's 99% of the time that's not a problem. And the rangers are out spot checking these lines, making sure, because that prevents timber theft and trespass issues from one neighbor to another. So that's a really important one that we're out looking for. The other one is the slash laws. So one of the things that we look for is accumulations of slash or flammable material in the woods. It's a fire prevention law that kind of aims to stop fire spread from property to property to property, or at least slow it down. So the rangers are out looking for slash within 25 feet of a property line, within 50 feet of a public way, or like 100 feet of a dwelling. If there are accumulations that would cause an unusual fire hazard, we're going to usually give a 30-day notice to the landowner or the woodcutter to make sure that those are moved so that they don't present a hazard, a fire hazard. So those are just some of the laws I wanted to touch on, and there are a whole slew of other ones, but I think those apply, well to the situation. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. And Scott, where can people go if they want to learn more about timber laws that maybe forest rangers are responsible for?
Yeah, so our website is full of information. The Maine Forest Service website. There should be a link to rules and laws there. There's a lot of rules that Forest Policy and Management has on there as well. The other thing you can do is a statute search on Maine.gov, and you can type in. There's a word search and then a title and section search, and you can search, slash, or you can search, cutting near a property line or unlawful cutting of trees or something like that. And there's some good information there as well. And Jared's Forestry Laws Handbook that he highlighted earlier, that red book, has a lot of laws in there as well. So that's really handy for people to have.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm also going to pass it off to Andy Shultz to talk about qualified professionals, because that is another part of standard 2. Is at the bullet point at the bottom, it did mention, being able to consult with qualified professionals to get accurate, up-to-date advice and information regarding forestry laws, protections, things like that. So Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about what makes a qualified professional and who they might be?
Sure, Casey, thank you. In Maine, pretty much the go-to person with regard to forestry and timber harvesting would be a licensed professional forester. Maine is a licensing state, which means that you need to have a license to practice forestry. Not true in every state in the country, but definitely true in Maine. Now, finding a licensed forester to work with can be a little bit of a process. What we would think of as an ideal situation is that the first licensed forester a landowner would talk to before harvesting or before moving ahead with forest management would be a Maine Forest Service district forester. They're available like Jared, and I believe there's quite a few others. Jared can chime in later as to how many there are right now, but they cover the entire state. Now, they will not perform a lot of services themselves, but every district forester has a kind of list of local consulting foresters in their area. So they would be happy to connect you to a couple, 3, 4 of those folks. Another option, if you, for whatever reason, want to bypass the district forester step, would be to go to the several lists that exist. The Maine Forest Service maintains a list of what are called stewardship foresters. These are licensed Maine consulting foresters who can provide a certain array of services. In most cases, that also includes handling harvests, and it definitely includes writing forest management plans. In addition, there is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, federal agency. They maintain lists of what are called forestry technical service providers. In many cases, those folks are the same ones on the stewardship forester list, but they're on that list because they can help you with practices for um, natural resource conservation service programs, which is a whole other webinar. But I'm just saying there's another list of licensed foresters. In addition, if you're talking to somebody, and of course you may find word of mouth, a neighbor has worked with a forester or somebody gives you a name. If you want to check to make sure that their license is current and if there's any issues, if they've had any licensing issues, you can look up an individual on the Maine Licensing Board's website and it'll tell you whether their status is active, suspended, retired, however, and whether or not they've had any history of violations, which thankfully very few licensed foresters do have any issues, but if it comes before the board, you can see it there. So I think that should help everybody find that licensed forester resource professional.
Thank you, Andy. All right, so we're going to transition now to Standard 4, which covers air, water, and soil protection. And the standard reads, forest management practices maintain or enhance the ecosystem and ecosystem services provided by the forest, including air, water, soil, and site quality. In addition, landowners are encouraged to consider climate smart, positive practices. And so I'm going to pass it back on to Jared to talk about some best management practices, which is one of our performance measures, as you can see in the bullet point below. So Jared, same deal as last time. Let me know when you're ready for the next slide.
All right, thank you. I guess I should mention too, I forgot to earlier, as Andy was kind of alluding to, as a district forester, one of the other things that I do is house calls, actually. If you have 10 or more forested acres, or if you and your neighbor can pool together 10 or more forested acres, you can have your local district forester out. We'll take a look at things. We'll talk to you about it. Whatever forest stewardship or property management topics you want to address, we can have a chat about. And that includes the rules and regulations as well as the best management practices, which we are going to get into now. This is another 4+ hour presentation that, yet again, I'm going to try to do in about 5 to 7 minutes. So let's go on to the next slide. So rules and regulations versus best management practice. What best management practices? What are the differences here? So the rules and regulations are the law, right? And the best management practices are suggestions of how to do your operation that will help you not violate the law, right? So they're very highly related to one another, but rules and regulations are law. BMPs are suggestions, helpful suggestions. And the whole BMP, we have a manual, one of those publications I was talking about earlier. And the whole BMP manual, primarily, it's a framework for how to deal with water on a job site. That is typically most of the woes you have in a forestry operation are going to be related to dealing with water on the landscape. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So the BMP manual, it outlines the 7 fundamental BMPs. These are if you do these things, everything should be fine, basically. That's defining objectives and responsibilities. So what are we all doing here and who's doing each part of it? Pre-harvest planning. So you don't just like hop in the equipment and go out and do stuff. You want to like get out on the ground, develop a plan, figure out where you're going with all of it and how it's all going to work out ahead of time. Anticipating site conditions, so keeping an eye on the weather. Are we having a storm soon? Do I need to like fix something with my stream crossing before the storm just to like make sure we don't get a bunch of mud that isn't going down there right now because it's dry? Or, is it like February? Are we going to have a thaw soon and my ice that's protecting the ground is all going to melt away and have problems that way? So anticipating site conditions. The 2 big ones in red are control water flow and minimize and stabilize exposed soil. Like I was talking about before, water is the source of 95% of your woes in a timber harvest. So controlling the water flow, we're always going to want to slow it down and spread it out. We call it the 2 V's for water management, volume and velocity. Those are the 2 things that give water energy, and energetic water moves sediment. So anytime you can slow water down or spread water out into smaller quantities, that's always a win. That's why that one's in red. And then also the other one in red is minimize and stabilize exposed soil. If the soil is protected from the water, that also makes it less likely to move. So we're trying to control the water and we're trying to protect the things the water's trying to move. So those are the most important ones and why they're in red. But then also protect integrity of water bodies. That's kind of self-explanatory. And then same with handle hazardous materials safely. That one's also kind of self-explanatory. Next slide, please. So here's kind of just a diagram of a make-believe timber harvest. In the top left, you have an open farm field. Everything else is forested. And you can see there's like a little square thing in that farm field. That's the log yard. That's where all the trees are getting pulled back to be loaded on trucks and hauled away. All the dotted double lines coming out of that yard are make-believe skid trails where all the equipment goes out to go cut the trees and pull them back to the yard. Everything else on there is like various wetlands, ponds, a stream, and a rock outcrop near the top. But the idea here is if you look at where those trails are, they're laid out in a very smart way. You're avoiding all these major obstacles. You're being careful how you're approaching these water bodies, spending as little time and distance as possible within the buffers, the protection buffers of these water bodies. You can imagine if somebody just jumped in their equipment and took off that yard, they might get into that northeast part of the property, see all that wood across the stream and think, well, geez, I guess I need to cross this stream to go cut wood, not realizing they could have just gone around the pond and gotten there without a stream crossing at all. So that's why we put planning as one of the first BMPs, because it's just so critical to have a good plan in place before you start doing things. It can make your life so much easier later on. Next slide, please. Here's another diagram of a job site. The rectangular thing on the right-hand side is supposed to be the log yard, and then you have a road that crosses a stream. And this is just pointing out several of the physical structures that we teach people about to use on their job site to manage water. You have things like cross drains to transport water from the ditch on one side of the road to the other, and you have turnouts, so you're putting your ditch water out into the woods and spreading it out so that the natural leaf litter and things like that will filter out any sedimentation and slow the water down. It all absorbs into the ground. You have things like water bars on your skid trail that keep the water from just channelizing in the skid trail and creating erosion that way. But yeah, we teach all about these various different methods of water control in the long version of the class. Next slide, please. And here's just a diagram actually from the BMP manual. I put this in here to demonstrate like the types of really great information that the manual has in it. And this just tells you everything that's important to know about creating a culvert crossing that's going to last and do well. This doesn't address sizing, that's on a different page, but in terms of the actual construction of the crossing. Next slide, please. And of course, I put this in here to demonstrate the difference between the rules and regulations versus the best management practices, the BMPs. So the rules for this situation say you can't get sedimentation into a water body. That's illegal. The BMP set, because it's never just one BMP. You're using them as a system that works together to prevent issues. So the BMPs in place here are one, they used a good bridge crossing. So they have a pre-made structure that they put across there to support the equipment. And the other big one that I can see offhand is they put in a lot of what we call slash. So just like the odds and ends and branches, the not very valuable timber things, they put that across the trail in a pattern we call it corduroy, and that protects the trail from getting rutted, which channelizes water and flows that water into the stream. So if they hadn't used a proper crossing, if they hadn't armored the approaches with all that slash corduroy, they might end up in violation of the law in the event of like a rainstorm or this starts to melt and the water all goes flowing down. So using BMPs to prevent accidentally violating the law. Next slide, please. I think that's it for me. Yep.
Great, thank you. You might notice that the bullet point on this slide looks a little different than the first one, and that is because Standard 4 has a lot of different what we call performance measures. So when you are having a site visit from an inspecting forester to check compliance, the bullet points that have been on these slides, that's what they're looking for to see that you've met those bullet points. So this one reads, landowners shall consider a range of forest management activities to control pests, pathogens, and unwanted vegetation. I'm going to pass it back to Andy Shultz to talk a little bit more about how landowners can meet this particular standard. Andy, let me know when you're.
Okay, thank you, Casey. If you haven't realized already, this standard 4 covers a lot of ground. And in particular, this section of it covers an awful lot. When you think about pests, that can be diseases, it can be bugs, it can be invasive plants, um, pathogens, like I said, diseases, but that unwanted species is another whole topic. It may not be an invasive species. For some folks, species like beech is unwanted. It's perfectly native, but you just don't want so much of it. So what do you do about it? In some cases, you want more softwood trees and less hardwood. So then hardwoods are unwanted. So it's quite a wide range of forest activities that in this particular case is not all that connected directly to harvesting, although it can be. So what it comes down to for a lot of this would be pesticides, in other words, herbicides or insecticides. I think we can go to the next slide. A good program to think about, and in fact, in an older version of the standards, it was a kind of a stronger language to say that tree farmers shall consider integrated pest management. That might seem a little daunting, but all integrated pest management really is looking at all your options, figuring out what's really the most cost-effective way to deal with a particular problem, and what does the least damage to the environment, to your land. So that's IPM in a nutshell, and you'll see there's some management techniques. Silvicultural refers to whether you're going to cut some trees or not. For instance, if you want to have less beech in the stand, maybe that's how you're going to deal with that. If you're looking at regeneration of seedlings, you might want to use some mechanical methods to thin those out, not technically logging, but a mechanical way of cutting out the trees or the vegetation you don't want. Biological can cover things like, for instance, right now when they're dealing with spruce budworm up north, they're using some biological controls, something called BT. And of course, there's chemical, and this usually is what gets the most discussion. And many folks that own small woodlots, including tree farmers, are not eager to use chemicals, which is why with integrated pest management, the slogan of the mantra is think first, spray last. So in many cases, that is the last resort. If you go to that, you want to make sure that you're following label regulations for whatever it is you're using. If you're not doing it yourself on your own land, you need to hire another natural resource professional called a licensed applicator, and that's a whole other licensing process, different from licensed forester. And they, of course, will follow all the labels. And it's most of the reputable folks there will try to start with the least amount of chemical and the most judicious and targeted use of that chemical, if they're even going to use it at all. In many cases, there's combinations of those techniques that will work to get the job done, or at least to help. One thing we've learned about invasive plants is that's a very tough situation. And in many cases, we're not talking about eradication. We're talking about learning to live with them and making sure that they're not interfering with other values, such as growing tree seedlings or perhaps recreational uses, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot to this. As Jared said, could probably do 4 hours or maybe even 4 days on this in another setting. But did I have another slide here? I- No. Okay. So I think I will leave it at that.
Great. Thank you so much. I just changed the slide over to another part of Standard 4. Like Andy said, this one is a robust standard, so it's got a lot of pieces to it. This one might sound unusual for most people in Maine, but this one deals with prescribed burning and says that when used, prescribed burn shall conform with landowner objectives and all applicable rules, laws, and regulations. So I'm going to pass it back to Scott to talk about prescribed burning and wildfire in general in Maine. And if you're interested in learning more about prescribed burning and its ecological role, what you can look for. So, Scott, I will click to your slide now.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, so this is great. I'm learning a lot about your standards more in depth than I knew before. So this is really good for me too. The Maine Forest Service. Well, first of all, historically, I don't think prescribed fire has been devoid of the landscape here in Maine. I think probably everybody's familiar with field burning in the spring, blueberry burning, in the fields and stuff like that. That's all prescribed fire. And so the Maine Forest Service has developed a very small but robust prescribed fire program that we brought all over the state and doing prescribed burns on small scale landscapes to accomplish all sorts of objectives, like what we've talked about here. Controlling invasive species is a way to do it. Creating habitat is a good objective as well for whatever you're managing for. It could be nesting birds or anything like that. And it also has, it can also be done for fuel reduction. So that's something that we're obviously concerned with in the wildfire control standpoint, is reducing that fuel load on the forest floor and keeping a nice clean understory burn. If we can keep fires on the ground, they're much easier to deal with. And if you develop a rotation with prescribed burning, you can actually lessen the impact of fire in your neck of the woods and help keep all those fuels down and keep that safe. So it does take a fair amount of planning for us to do. Like I said, objectives, ecological, fuel, that kind of thing. It involves multiple site visits and a burn plan as well. So it's not just something that's done at a whim. There's a lot of planning. And we are fortunate enough to have rangers who are qualified as prescribed fire burn bosses across the state that help plan, implement, execute these kind of burns, and they are very helpful. We burn a lot with the Nature Conservancy. We burn a lot with some with land trusts and some with large landowners as well. I'm just thinking to the past that some of the stuff that we've done up north, but it's been really good. So objectives are important, and it's not a real fast process. We want to take our time, and we want to be very deliberate with what we're doing. Usually, the burning that we do also coincides with our fire season. So it's springtime, and our second shot is in the fall, and that's usually when the fuels are receptive, and usually the objectives can be accomplished. And those are all lined out right in the burn plan. It's multiple pages long, considering everything from resources that you need, what the objectives are, what the outcomes are supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be when you're done, and all sorts of different things. So on the execution day, on the day that we've done all the planning and that we've done all the prep work, and that may involve some work by the landowner as well if you're interested, as far as making control lines around the area that you want to burn. If you have tractor or something like that, that can be helpful, or at least having it mowed. And we get on site, we have all our resources there, and a lot of times we'll involve the local fire departments as well, because it's a great training opportunity for them. It's great in a prescribed fire in a controlled setting to be a student of fire and to watch fire behavior and watch what it does. And it's great training for everybody, including our rangers. So we do our on-site checks, take the weather, do a prescription check, make sure we're in the prescription, and we make a no-go decision whether we're going to do it or not. based on all the parameters laid out in the plan. And we, like I said, we just want to be very deliberate and very careful with what we do when we're putting fire on the ground. And it's a great program. There are only 48 around 48 field rangers statewide, so we cover all the way from Madawaska all the way to Kittery. So it's something that if you're interested in finding out more and getting in the planning cycle, you can visit our website and contact one of our regional offices. All the numbers for the northern region, which is out of Ashland, central region out of Old Town, and southern region out of Augusta are right there. And you can just leave us a message, and we'll follow up with you and see what we can work out. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. That was very helpful information.
Thank you.
And I think that covers standard 2 and standard 4.
And I think it would be good to put a little something in here about the standard language, the language of the standards, the words shall and should
Okay.
that show up, and they're embedded there in standards 2 and 4 and really all the standards. And so now we're getting a little in the weeds about if you want to be a tree farmer, and there will come a moment when you'll review these standards with an inspecting forester. And in some cases, if it should, it's okay if you're not doing that. It's something to think about. When the word shall shows up, then that is really something that needs to be done in order to meet that standard and to be a tree farmer. However, occasionally you'll see the word shall consider, which kind of takes a little of the edge off the shall, but it means that at least you have thought through some options, and that's where you're going to see things like integrated pest management and use of pesticides altogether. So just to say that to be a tree farmer doesn't mean you have to use integrated pest management, you have to use pesticides, or even that you have to use prescribed fire. If that's not appropriate to your situation, it's enough to say, well, we thought about it. It doesn't fit here. So you can still essentially check that box and continue on. The one other thing to say about all of this is that to document it is key. And the best place to document it is in your forest management plan, which is the topic for standard 1 and a whole other webinar at a later date. And with that, I'll shut
That
up.
was perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself.
That certainly reflects one of the major questions that I had on all of these things, and that is how does a landowner demonstrate compliance with some of these standards? Is it sort of on the ground, or should we keep certain kinds of records? And Andy, you kind of suggested, some sort of documentation and records.
Yeah. Well, it is right in the standard that if you do use pesticides, you need to document it. What kind, how much, when, etc. So something to keep in mind, if you go that route for invasive plants or for species control or for trying to keep certain insects out. If you do it, document it. Now, if you're contracting with a licensed applicator, you're going to have some records right there.
Right.
So the bigger challenge is if you are going to do some spot work yourself on your own land, which is perfectly fine, but to keep track of that would be the key. As far as some of these things, the documentation or that moment often is when you're walking and talking with the inspecting forester.
Right.
And in the conversation, you bring up the standard about prescribed fire. And in the conversation, you say, no, that's not really going to work here. So as long as there's kind of a note, and usually if I'm the inspecting forester on the 021 form, we simply check the box and say, it has been considered.
Another question that comes up is, Jared, during your discussion of best management practices, the focus of these seems to be during a harvest operation. What about between the harvest operations? What do I, as a landowner, need to do to maintain these sorts of things?
So the rules and regulations and the best management practices, well, the rules and regulations in particular, that is specifically for during a timber harvest.
Mhm.
I mean, you should be setting things up so that it's like durable for expected weather events after the harvest as well. But um, it really is primarily focused on during the harvest. If you're having more things like a long-term crossing, certainly like a land access sort of deal that you're using the trails for afterward.
Mhm.
Certainly monitoring those for how well they're holding up. The conditions can change over time. Um, just check on them occasionally, like every, I don't know, quarter or so, hop out of your ATV and take a look at your crossing to make sure it's still holding up and see if you need to
Right.
do any remediation on it, that sort of thing. But it primarily is mostly during the active harvest because that's when the vast majority of the disturbances are typically happening.
Mhm. 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 Good. Very good advice. Now, the other question that popped up too, as well, is thinking in terms of boundaries and boundary marking during a harvest operation. You mentioned that there should be some space between the boundary and where the actual harvest occurs. Is flagging necessary, or if you just have a good painting of your boundaries, updated painting, is that sufficient?
Yes, but absolutely. Yeah, good boundary paint is fine.
Mhm.
A lot of the times where we see issues with property line marking is like along stone walls that
Ah.
are known property lines, and everybody's like, "Yep, that's the property line." Both landowners agree and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
the law says by some temporary and visible means. So flagging, even though you know it's the line
Right.
and your neighbor knows it's the line, I need to know it's the line when I'm there. So because there's stone walls everywhere in the woods.
Right.
So and at some lots. So yep, just laying some flagging along that line is super important. Lets the ranger know who's inspecting the lot. Yep, that's a property line.
Good.
So and there's no incursion to it. Yep, we're good to go. So
Mhm.
that's a great question, Larry.
Good.
And I'd say with painted lines, just be sure that it really is as visible as it is to you. Make sure that you want to approach it thinking like somebody who's never been there before, and also somebody who's never been there who's maybe in the cab of a large piece of machinery. Just making sure that it's going to be visible to someone in those circumstances. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, just honest mistake. Operator didn't see the flag. There was a flag here and there's another flag 60 feet that way, and he just went right between them and never saw him. So um, just be sure you're considering what the flagging is there to do to make sure that these machines don't accidentally go off of your property, and think about their visibility from that perspective.
Sure. Good point. Mhm.
Great questions, Larry. This is
Uh, I might add to that a little bit from personal experience is that not the stone wall is not always the line, and neither is the
Right.
fence.
Right.
Yep.
Without going into details, I found this out kind of the hard way one time.
Mhm.
So, meeting with adjoining landowners, making sure that everyone's in agreement. Um, Another thing too is a good idea, is what I was going to say.
Mhm.
In fact, notifying all your abutting landowners ahead of a harvest is a great idea. One of the reasons is to allay their concerns about that you're not putting in a shopping mall. And the other is that this is a good way to uncover any issues with property lines. Somebody will come out and say, last time they cut over the line 20 feet. So don't assume that, where the stumps are is the line either. A lot of assumptions you can get caught up in. The other thing is that some folks are colorblind to certain colors. And I work a lot with a particular logger who has a difficult time with red, orange, and yellow. It all looks gray to him. And so unless it's a long-tailed flag and it's really waving in the wind, he might miss it. So when I'm working with him, we use blue flags.
Mhm.
And I leave them long too, so that they will flap in the wind.
Good.
I know of a circumstance where there was flagging put out that was supposed to be the trail for the equipment to follow, and there was other flagging put out that was the property boundary, and the guy was colorblind and went down the wrong one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But that's why communication is a best management practice.
Yeah. And planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole planning thing includes some way of making sure everybody knows what the code is for different ribbons or paint marks. If you're using, say, two or three slashes on a tree to denote a buffer, do not cut past this point. Um, the Getting all this together into something like a harvesting plan can be a really good idea because it literally puts everybody on the same page, you know. And as long as that's, as you said, Jared, communicated clearly to all the players, logger, landowner, forester, um, there's a road construction crew in there, or somebody doing dirt work, and that can be very reassuring, I think, to the neighboring landowner. They understand this is not a haphazard operation. This is something that's being planned and done by human beings, not just machines.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent points. Anyone have anything else? We're being very time efficient, which I appreciate because my tummy is grumbling. But
Well, I appreciate all of the opportunity to get some good information on all of these aspects. I think it's going to help us out with a number of things, including some of our peer-to-peer types of approaches that we've been talking about. So this will be excellent.
yeah, and I know the attendance for this event is we'll say lackluster a little bit. But again, like I said, this is recorded. I'm going to clean it up a little bit and put it on the YouTube channel, and I'll also embed the YouTube video in our upcoming e-newsletter. That way everyone can watch it, on their own time and know that it is available for them. So I don't want you to think your time is wasted. This has been incredibly valuable. The webinar went phenomenal. We didn't have any technological issues except for right at the beginning with everyone getting their mics set up. So, you know, it went fantastic. Everyone had such great content, and I'm so, so, so grateful for all of your time and energy in this. I think it went really well. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, and thanks for organizing it. I am happy to have the opportunity to put something like this out there. I think it's a great idea to give people an idea of kind of what goes into all this. It's a side of things that I think a lot of just the average landowner doesn't see. So it's kind of the dipping the toes in to let them know what they don't know. So that they know what questions they want to ask. So I think it's a great idea. So thanks.
Yeah, back in the day when Maine was a certification state, we did get caught up in the weeds of are we checking the boxes and we might get audited and did we apply the standards correctly? Being a recognition state, I think takes a little pressure off of that, and we can kind of get to what's underlying the standards, which is doing good forestry. So if you just think of the standards as just one way to open the door to just talking about things like protecting water quality, or how do you deal with the unwanted plants, or does it make sense to prescribe a fire somewhere, controlled burn
Mhm.
versus waiting for nature to do something? And that's what's really important. It's like, what's the landowner want to do? What are their goals? How do you get there? And if they're doing it in a sustainable manner, then they should be a tree farmer.
Agreed. Agreed. All right, well, I won't take up any more of anyone else's time, and I will, like I said, clean up this video and I'll send it to everyone, so feel free to share it as you see fit. And then I don't know for you guys with the Forest Service, if you guys would like any reporting specifics on my end, shoot me an email and I'm happy to share any information that I can with you that makes your job easier as far as claiming this event, claiming hours, whatever you need from me. Happy to send that over for you guys. But I will hang around for a second, but I feel free to log off and go eat some food. And thank you guys again.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks for organizing it, Casey.
Yeah, happy to.
All right. See you all next time.
so long.